Hi guys! Well, today I'm going to show you how I made my Destiny 2 Holdfast Robes. So let's get started. These are actually a super easy cosplay to make. I made these for my Destiny 2 Exo Warlock cosplay, as you can see here. And they are made out of EVA foam. This particular foam I picked up from Bunnings for $10, and the jacket itself is actually just from Target, which I got a couple of years ago. So if you've got a black jacket, maybe a black turtleneck just to cover up your neck if you are going as a Warlock Exo, you've got a cosplay. So after all of the recent 3D printing builds I've been doing, I thought, you know what? Let's go back to the basics. This was a cosplay I wanted to put together for TikTok. I wanted it to be relatively cheap to make and easy as well. Now, I really like the design of the Holdfast Robes, and I'm going for a little bit of a Vex look with my Exo, hence the copper. And I thought, you know what? Let's make it. Let's put it together. This took me maybe a week tops to make. You could definitely make it in a couple of days if you'd like to. I just didn't have the time at the time. What you will need for this build is EVA foam, which, as I said, you can pick up from Bunnings for $10. You'll get 4 massive sheets. It's great, it'll last you a little bit. You will also need some elastics, which are hard to see, but some of these parts are held in place with elastics. You will also need some paints, some sort of glue. You can use hot glue. I believe I used super glue for this build. It's been a while. It took a while to film this, sorry. And you will also need a couple of tools. For this particular build, I used a rotary tool to sand the edges down. At the time, I didn't know what I was doing, but we'll talk about that in a second. But it is nice when you're working with foam to have some sort of rotary tool. You'll also need some safety equipment, like some respiratory gear, because you don't want any of this foam dust getting into your lungs. There are alternatives for some of the tools, but this is what I used. And besides that, you're good to go. So how about we jump right into it? So the first step for this particular cosplay was to cut out the main shapes of the armor and see if I can actually put something together. There were no patterns involved here. I was simply looking at the reference photos and reference videos and trying to get a similar shape. It's important to note that you can always take off more material, but it's a lot harder to put it back on. So just go gradually, bit by bit, until you come up with what you like. I found that using a dressmaker mannequin was really helpful in trying to get the sizing right, so I wasn't having to stand in front of a mirror and try to do it to myself. This was a lot easier, and if you have anything like this, I recommend you use it. And once I was happy with the main pieces, it was time to start gluing them together. I'm using super glue for this. There's a couple of other things you can use, but I found super glue worked best at the time. The awesome part about foam is that it actually can curve to the shapes you want, and you can use heat to set it into these shapes as well, although I didn't find I needed to set it with heat for this particular project. At least not for this part. Again, we are going with the flow here. This is a really easy, no risk cosplay that I'm doing, and I'm sort of just going with it. So here I'm using the part that I just made to work out the sizes of the section that goes on top of it. No patterns involved here, just freehanding it, and it works really well, and this is really good practice as well for working out how cosplay pieces go together. Now, you will see me using a knife in a lot of these scenes, but I did find that the scissors worked 10 times better. The knife was handy for the little details like here, but I prefer the scissors. Maybe my knife is blunt, I'm not sure, but this is just what worked for me. Now we can put the top piece on, and yeah, the edges aren't looking so crash hot right now, but don't worry, we're going to sand those back later. here I'm cutting out some little slots because there was this kind of weird detail on the armor pieces. It was like a little cord or something that went across, so I'm just cutting out the slots so I can fit a piece of foam into them to get that effect. This neck guard was another piece that was a little bit finicky, but you just need to keep on cutting it down to size until you're happy with it. There is a lot of details that you can build up with foam. Maybe I could have put some more details on, but I was happy with where this was left off. And most armor pieces are usually just some typical shapes. All you need to do is learn to recognize what those shapes are, and then you can apply them in your own cosplay building. This takes a little bit of practice. I found that just drawing armor really helped me with this, and I hope it helps with you too. So now that the front plate is all put together, I have to work out how I'm going to connect it to the back plate. I started off with just making it all one foam piece, but I made the same mistake that I made countless times before, and that is not accounting for my head. So yeah, this wasn't going to fit over my head. I end up going back and cutting these off like so, and adding elastic instead so I can get it over my big head. You'd think I'd learn by now. How many costumes have I made and I keep making the same mistake? I do it all the time with helmets. I don't think I'm ever gonna learn. Oh well. We adapt, we learn, we work it out. This is how it ended up. Now the Holdfast Robes have this sort of pipe that goes around the back of the head, and for that I'm just using a thin strip of EVA foam. Looking back, I do wish that this part was a little bit more curved, a little bit more round, but this did the job. Now it's time to work on the shoulders. Now you might see in the background there is a program I've got up with a 3D model. I found the model files for this online and it made it so much easier to just work out what the shapes were supposed to be. If you've got Blender or any other sort of 3D modeling software, I really highly recommend that you look up the Destiny STL generator. It has heaps of game files on it that you can use to help work out your costumes, and it's also good for 3D printing as well. But it makes a wonderful, wonderful reference so that you don't have to load up the game and try to reference things from a really weird perspective. This is just a lot easier. Now, as we are freehanding this, make sure you check the fit as you go. Just keep checking it. Every single time you make an adjustment, check the fit, check the fit. Remember that, guys. But these worked really well. And now I'm going to sit them in a mug to try and keep that curved form. And we're going to use a hairdryer to heat these up so we can keep this form as well. You can also use a heat gun. I don't have a heat gun, so I use a hairdryer. And yeah, these mugs worked really well for like holding it in the right shape I wanted. So the idea is you heat up the foam, to the shape that you want, and then you let it cool down while it stays in this shape. That'll allow it to hold that form. I'm also doing the same with this little pipe section on the main armor piece. So now the main bulk of the armor is done. Now I'm quickly going to add in an extra piece for this little pipe section here, just make it a bit longer. All I'm doing is super gluing another piece in. But now it's time to sand back all of the pieces, and to do this I'm going to use a rotary tool. Now, as a bit of a noob, I'm making a little bit of a mistake here. When you're using a rotary tool for sanding foam, you should actually just go in one direction. You should go in the direction that the rotary tool is rotating. You'll know which direction this is because your rotary tool will automatically try to go in that direction. You don't want to go against this because you'll end up getting like a really rough sort of finish. Now I did find that going against it was good if you're trying to get rid of like big pieces really quickly, but you ended up with more mistakes that you had to buff out later. So just go in the direction that the tool is going. But the rotary tool is also good for making sort of details in it. So you can see I'm kind of using the butt of the edge of the rotary tool to add some battle damage, and I think this looks really cool. I also use it to add some details into the shoulder pads, as you can see here. And honestly, I love this rotary tool. It's actually my brother's that I've stolen for the purpose of cosplay building because he's not using it at the moment. But definitely recommend that if you're gonna use foam for crafting cosplays, invest in a rotary tool. It's the best decision I've ever made. And I'm slowly getting better at it. I wasn't very good during this, but I'm getting better. So now that everything is all sanded, the shapes are looking fabulous, it is time to start painting. Now for this, I didn't actually put down a primer. I'm not sure why, I think I was in a rush when I was doing this. But it turned out okay anyway. There are certain primers you should use with foam because foam bends and it can crack the paint. I've yet to find one that I like, so I ended up just putting the paint straight on. And it's held up pretty well. I think it's because these particular pieces don't bend too much. Whereas, you know, one of my hunter cosplays, the arm pieces bend every time I put it on. These don't, they stay in the same spot, and I think that's what's kept the paint looking so good. Now the paint that I'm using, and just reading the label, it's actually a paint and primer, so maybe that's why I didn't use the primer. But it is Rust-Oleum Universal Advanced Formula Metallic Paint and Primer in one. In aged copper, and I love the color of this paint, but I have not been able to find it again. This is an old piece of spray paint that we had in the shed for ages and ages and ages, but it looks fabulous and I love the Vex color that it gives off. And here we go, this is it all painted, but it's looking a little bit too clean, so it's time to do some weathering. And to do this, we're going to use some acrylic paint. Now, I'm mainly just using a black acrylic paint for this. Not only am I doing it as, you know, the thick paint for some of the areas that call for a black sort of finish, but I'm also using it in a wash to try and like make it look like grime and dirt, because these are Guardians. They're, you know, they're doing all sorts of crazy stuff. I don't think they shower. I don't think they wash their armor. Their armor needs to look nice and grimy like it has recently been in battle, and that's what I'm trying to do here. Doing the weathering of any sort of cosplay is probably my favorite part ever, and I love it so much. It's so much fun and it really ties everything together. So I think this is a good angle to talk about what I'm doing with the weathering. And so I'm putting down a really watered down layer of acrylic paint, sort of like around the edges, anywhere where I think like if they were in muddy rain, that's where the dirt would fall. And once I put that down, I'm using a tissue to wipe it off again. And then you get this sort of dusty, dirty, muddy, sort of rusted look. And that's what we're going for. We want the edges to look worn in and dusty and dirty and like they've been rolling around in the mud. So yeah, get your acrylic paint, add a lot of water to it, add it to the edges, and then wipe it off a little bit. And you'll find that the acrylic paint will actually stay in the gaps as well, like any low points, any battle damage that you've added in. The acrylic paint is going to pull in those areas, but I do tend to go back with a less watered down version of the paint in these areas anyway, just to make them really pop. And you can see me doing that there for these little gash marks and stuff. I'm adding in a less watered down version of the paint just to make them really stand out. And now the armor is pretty much done. I'm going to let this dry, and now I'm going to add a gloss coat to it, as you can see right here. I think it really makes everything pop, and it doesn't actually look this glittery and weird in person as it does on camera, but there we go. But I did find that the little elastics that I put on the shoulder pieces just weren't staying on. I find that elastic, super glue, and foam doesn't really work very well together. So I added a small slit so that I could thread the elastic through, and now I'm just going to sew that into place just to make sure that these arm pieces aren't going to fall apart after lots of uses. But after this, the armor is actually finished. All you need to do is find a black coat, maybe a black turtleneck, and you have a pair of Holdfast Robes from Destiny 2. And this was the first time I had tried on the full costume. So I hope you enjoy. So guys, that video there, that was the first time I had put on this cosplay, and I was very, very excited about it. And I am still very excited about it. I love this cosplay. I love how it turned out. I loved how easy it is to make and how cheap it is to make too. Like, 3D printing is expensive. Foam is not. I'm just a little bit lazy and not super good at foam. So, but I need to practice. And this was such a good practice. Like, look at it. Look at it. I love this. I want to bring this to a con one day when we're out of lockdown. Yeah, we're back in lockdown. But guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope this really gave you some tips on how to make your own cosplays, how to maybe jump into foam building if you are looking at getting into the hobby. And I hope you enjoyed the video as well. We have changed up the background a little bit. I've moved my desk around, hence why the background has changed, and I kind of like it. I'm actually using my webcam at the moment, and it seems to be doing pretty well, so I think we're going to stick with this format. It's easy to make as well. But guys, if you like what I'm doing here, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. It's free, and it means a lot to me. Thank you! Expect a lot more prop building videos in the future, especially this guy. This guy still needs to happen. He's pretty much built, I just haven't edited the video, so that'll be happening. and this will be happening as well. So stay tuned. But guys, that's really all I have to say for this video, so I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!